If we can't make a deal with China, then the tariffs will be very, very substantial.
From world wars to Cold War to trade wars, what you're seeing right now between the two superpowers in the world are tariff wars, or what you can call trade wars, the sequel. And the latest plot twist, Washington slapped a 245% tariff on Chinese goods. But not all sectors, because America is being smart about it. They're calling out Beijing for unfair trade practices and export restrictions. But Beijing is not blinking. The dragon is fighting back, and it might also create a world where the US becomes just about redundant. Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. Tariffs, counter tariffs, retaliatory tariffs, and the latest being a 245% tariff by America on Chinese goods. Washington is trying to call Beijing out, but Beijing is standing firm, not blinking one bit. China's foreign ministry straight up dismissed the move, calling it a numbers game and branding the US a laughingstock for using tariffs as economic intimidation.
这场关税战是美方发起的，中方采取必要的反制措施，是为了维护自身的正当权益和国际公平正义，完全合理合法。中方的立场一直很明确，关税战、贸易战没有赢家，中方不愿打，但也不怕打。如果美方真的想通过对话谈判解决问题，就应该停止极限施压那一套，停止威胁讹诈，在平等、尊重、互惠的基础上同中方对话。
It really started with that White House statement putting that number of 245% and saying China faces up to 245%. And clearly, it seems to suggest that there's been one more hike in the tariffs. That's not the case. But it is certainly the case that there are items which will now face 245% tariffs. The 245%, and think of it as slabs, is actually going to be imposed on needles and syringes. Lithium-ion batteries come in at 173%, toys at 0%, and you may want to ask, why is that? It's actually the total duties, import tariffs imposed in successive rounds. So think of it this way, the base rate which was already existing, then pre-2025, remember Trump imposed some tariffs in his first term. Some of them continued. Joe Biden continued with some additional levies. So that's all pre-2025. Subsequent to that, we had another couple of slabs, which was steel, aluminium, as well as automobiles. So you add that. The fourth was the fentanyl tariff, 20%, that hit, for example, smartphones. So while smartphones have been exempted today, the smartphone shipments will face a 20% tax because that is pre-existing, as is called the fentanyl era. And finally, the big 2nd April bombshell that went up to 125%. So all of that put together is 245%, but not every good that is imported into the United States or can be imported from China is at that rate. However, in terms of the headline impact, it is very, very significant. There are certain categories which are exempt, but a bulk of Chinese imports to the United States is at very, very high levels of tariff now.
And here's where it gets wild. While governments trade threats, TikTok's flooded with Chinese influencers pulling back the curtain on global manufacturing. They're posting from inside factories making products for big US brands like Lululemon, Nike, and they're telling American buyers, why pay extra? Come straight to the source, buy from us, direct from China. Take a look at some of the videos.
Do you recognize this style, this bag? Of course you do. For the past more than 30 years, we have been the OEM factory for most of the luxury brands around the world. Gucci, Prada, Coach, Louis Vuitton, you name it. But for this, I am not proud because we were only making our wages. The profit margin for the people who are actually making the bags are very low. What I'm really proud of is that first, we have the best quality control. Two, we have the best craftsmanship. You know, Chinese craftsmen are always intelligent and diligent. Three, we have the most complete supply chain. We always get what we want, like zippers, accessories of any kind, any color, and leathers immediately. Now, as the USA and its little European brothers are trying to refuse Chinese goods, don't you think luxury brands are not trying to move their OEM out of China? Yes, they did, but they failed because the OEM factories out of China, they don't have good quality control and they don't have as good craftsmanship. Their workers are either too expensive or too lazy. Three, they don't have any supply chain. They always have trouble getting leather or zippers or any accessories. That is why they failed, and that is why we will always be the best OEM factory for luxury brands. Why don't you just contact us and buy from us? You won't believe the prices we give you.
Who are the suppliers behind Lululemon? Number one, Xianglong Apparel, who supplies the most yoga suits, and it is also OEM for Fila and Under Armour. Number two, Hongqisheng Clothing, who produces yoga suits for Lululemon. Lululemon sells this jacket for nearly $100, but here only costs you $6 to $5 with similar fabric and quality. If you want to get in touch with suitable sportswear supplier, contact with me. I'm Rosie from Yiwu, China.
Want to know who's the Chinese factory behind Nike, Adidas, Fila, and UGG? Number one, the biggest factory for Nike shoes in China is called FJF Group. They're located in China, Fujian. FJF is also China's biggest shoe factory. Second, the factory behind Adidas shoes is Baocheng Group in China. Baocheng Group has factories in China and in Southeast Asia. Number three, the factory behind UGG in China is called Henglong Group in Henan. Henglong Group is also the biggest factory of UGG shoes in the entire world. And number four, the factory behind Fila Group in China is called Shentai Group, and they're located in Zhejiang, China. Comment and let me know what other products I should do next, and follow me if you want to know more factories in China.
But Beijing's not just flexing on TikTok. China thinks of this trade war, this tariff war, as an opportunity. It's also playing a dangerous game now in the South China Sea. This week, Chinese and the Philippines vessels accused each other of aggressive maneuvers near the contested Scarborough Shoal, a prime fishing ground that both claim. Manila says a Chinese Coast Guard ship tried to block its route. Beijing says the Philippines staged a false collision. This isn't just about boats. It's about control over a $3 trillion shipping route that multiple Southeast Asian nations claim. And amid all this chaos, guess who's on tour? This week, China's President Xi Jinping is on a whirlwind diplomatic tour of Southeast Asia. But this isn't just another round of state dinners and press conferences. President Xi's visit is a calculated move, part of much larger geopolitical puzzle. One that stretches across continents and could redefine global power dynamics in the decades ahead. Xi's tour includes key stops in Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia. Remember, all these countries have territorial disputes with China. Today, they're willing to engage and more than willing to engage Beijing. Each of these countries play a crucial role in China's flagship project as well, the Belt and Road Initiative, or the BRI. Xi Jinping is pitching China as a source of stability and certainty in what he calls a turbulent and fragmented world created by none other than Donald Trump. Xi Jinping's first stop was Vietnam. Upon arrival in Hanoi, he was received with full ceremonial honors, a red carpet welcome, military salutes, and all the symbolic nods to China and Vietnam's historic communist alliance. But these visits aren't about nostalgia. It is about signaling unity in an increasingly fragmented world. Xi met with Vietnam's Communist Party chief, To Lam, and emphasized that China and Vietnam can offer stability and certainty at a time when the global order is being reshaped And that message wasn't just for domestic headlines. It was aimed squarely at Washington, D.C. and at Brussels. The optics were powerful, a tightly controlled, disciplined, bilateral engagement between two authoritarian neighbors that are rapidly emerging as hubs in the global supply chain. Behind the scenes, a range of new cooperation agreements were signed on trade, investment, high-speed rail connectivity, and even joint efforts on green energy. From Vietnam, Xi flew to Malaysia, where he spent 3 days meeting Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim and high-level officials as well. China is already Malaysia's biggest trading partner and investor, and that relationship is only deepening. Xi is pushing to accelerate negotiations on a China-ASEAN free trade agreement, with Malaysia as a key driver. And this matters because Malaysia holds the ASEAN chair this year, which gives it outsized influence in shaping regional economic policy.
面对当前国际秩序和经济全球化遭受冲击，两国将同地区国家团结一致，共同抵御地缘政治和阵营对抗暗流，突破单边主义和保护主义逆流，保护好亚洲家园的美好发展前景。
At a time when multilateralism is under tremendous strain, when some nations abandon the principles of shared responsibility and others question long-standing commitments, China's global initiative offers a new lease on hope. They look outward, not inward. They speak not of rivalry, but of renewal.
In Cambodia, the third and final stop, China already holds enormous sway. Beijing has invested heavily in Cambodian infrastructure, education, and telecommunications. Prime Minister Hun Manet has repeatedly praised China as Cambodia's most trustworthy friend. So what's really going on here? To understand Xi's Southeast Asia tour, you need to understand the Belt and Road Initiative. Launched in 2013, the BRI is China's trillion-dollar plan to redraw the world map through roads, railways, ports, pipelines, and even digital infrastructure. It's modeled on the ancient Silk Road trade routes, but turbocharged for the 21st century. There are two main corridors: the Silk Road Economic Belt, a land-based route connecting China to Central Asia, the Middle East, that is West Asia, and Europe. The 21st Century Maritime Silk Road, a sea-based route connecting Southeast Asia to Africa, the Middle East, or what we call West Asia, and Europe. The vision? Build seamless connectivity from China to the rest of the world, allowing Chinese goods, capital, and influence to flow outward, and resources, markets, and strategic assets to flow inward. So what's in it for China? Well, China's economy, while still huge, is slowing down. Domestic demand is plateauing, and the country has overcapacity in industries like steel, cement, and construction. BRI helps export that excess capacity to emerging markets. It also opens up new investment frontiers for Chinese companies and creates jobs at home in logistics, engineering, and high-speed rail manufacturing. By financing and constructing key infrastructure projects abroad, China secures influence over critical supply routes, trade flows, and digital infrastructure. Ports in Sri Lanka, railways in Kenya, and telecom networks in Latin America are all part of this strategic footprint. China also needs oil, gas, copper, cobalt, lithium, raw materials of the modern economy. BRI helps China bypass choke points like the Strait of Malacca by creating inland routes and energy pipelines through countries like Myanmar and Pakistan. But not everything glitters. Critics call it a debt trap or debt trap diplomacy as well. Countries like Sri Lanka and Laos have found themselves deep in the red. And Washington? Not a fan. with Trump even reacting to Xi's Vietnam visit, claiming China and Vietnam are trying to figure out how to, pardon my French, screw the United States of America. Well, the China-Laos railway has slashed travel times and boosted trade. But the cost? Nearly $6 billion, which has pushed Laos's debt to over 90% of its GDP. Then we have the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or the CPEC, which was supposed to be a game changer. Instead, it's faced delays, security concerns, and financial instability. Local resentment is growing, and some projects have stalled entirely. The Mombasa-Nairobi railway, built with Chinese loans, is bleeding money. Meanwhile, some Kenyan workers say they're treated unfairly on Chinese-managed construction sites. And the Jakarta-Bandung high-speed rail, Southeast Asia's first bullet train, was supposed to be a triumph. But costs spiraled from $5 billion to $7.3 billion, raising questions about transparency and feasibility. Yet China keeps pushing forward. Why? Because in Beijing's eyes, even incomplete or loss-making projects are strategic assets. A half-built railway still gives China leverage. A port with low traffic can still be used for military or logistical purposes in the future. To this, Washington and Brussels haven't been sitting quietly. The US launched the Build Back Better World initiative in 2021, while the EU proposed Global Gateway. Both are seen as Western alternatives to BRI, but neither has matched China's scale or speed. Critics say China's pitch often wins because it's faster, less bureaucratic, and more flexible with authoritarian regimes. But it comes at a cost. Civil society groups often get sidelined, environmental and labor protections are often weak, and local industries sometimes get overshadowed by Chinese imports and workers. Still, in many parts of Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia, BRI remains the only game in town. Here's where it gets really interesting. Xi's Southeast Asia tour comes just as the United States of America and Europe imposed fresh tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, solar panels, and green tech. The West is trying to decouple from Chinese manufacturing, but Southeast Asia, it's doubling down. Vietnam and Malaysia in particular have become major manufacturing hubs. Western companies are moving supply chains there. But guess who builds the ports, trains, and digital networks that make all that possible? China. So while the West tries to contain China's rise, China is securing the very infrastructure that global trade depends on. Xi's stop in Cambodia might seem less high profile, but it's deeply strategic. China has quietly secured access to Ream Naval Base on Cambodia's southern coast. Satellite images show the construction of new piers and infrastructure that could support Chinese naval operations. While both countries deny military intent, US officials have raised concerns that Ream could give China its first overseas military base in Southeast Asia. So yes, the BRI builds roads and railways, but it also builds alliances, access points, and influence structures that run deep beneath the surface. Xi Jinping is rebranding BRI as high-quality, green, and digital. Gone are the days of reckless lending and flashy mega projects. The new BRI, that's BRI 2.0, is smaller in scale but more strategic in impact and in nature. Think fiber optic cables, smart cities, cloud infrastructure, and green energy parks. As the global south rises, China wants to be the power behind the curtain. The country that builds rails, powers the grids, and connects data. Xi Jinping's Southeast Asia tour is more than a diplomatic pit stop. It's a strategic spectacle, one that showcases China's ambition to be an indispensable partner in a world increasingly divided. And with BRI, Beijing isn't just building roads, it's laying the foundation for a new world order. This also comes at a time when Donald Trump is being very tough on the world and particularly countries in Southeast Asia that have become major manufacturing hubs. In such a scenario, China is using this as an opportunity. Thank you for watching Statecraft.